This is the E-Commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome YIQI Wu from Aimerce to the podcast. Welcome, YIQI.
Hello, everybody. My name is YIQI, CEO of Aimerce.
It's great to have you along for the ride today, and we're going to have a really cool conversation, hopefully, about this amazing technology that you're building. But let's talk about your background just a little bit first and how you got into this crazy game of e-com, because you've really got a super strong engineering background and you've worked for some of the majors. You were a Meta person for a very long time, but you were also the engineering manager over at Reddit. And look, it's interesting. It's interesting specifically that you were with Reddit, because for many years, I was not a Redditor. I was not into the Reddit sphere at all until a couple of years ago when reach really started to drop on LinkedIn. Organic reach started to drop, and LinkedIn started to get really noisy. And I was starting to look for the next best place to start spending time. And I was really never into Twitter or X. I never really got any traction on Twitter or X. And I've started to spend more and more time on Reddit. And I've started to find it more interesting. But I find that there's a lot more trolling that goes on there because 99% of people are sitting behind aliases, basically alias accounts. I think I'm one of the few people on Reddit that actually uses my real name as a real profile with real links. But man, what a background to cut your teeth in, right?
Like, I'm humbled. So I always call myself engineer, even though I'm leading a team right now. Like, I do a lot of everything, but I still consider myself like a full engineer. So a little bit background by myself. I graduated with a CS degree, and I'm lucky enough to got a job like right after college and got into Facebook at the time. That was like really good time at Facebook. And then I started as an engineer. I did a bunch of very interesting stuff. I worked on Facebook payments infra as my first job. At the time, the whole payments team was like, 10 people? Like, crazy to think about it. We're processing like billions of dollars like every single month. And then it's like only 10 people there. And then I was lucky enough to work on Instagram stories and Instagram DM. One time when Instagram was start thinking about launching out stories and DM back in 2016, 2017. So that was like a massive success for me. And it was a really fun journey. Happy to talk about it. That's like another story. And then I got into a bunch of other projects, which is also pretty fun. I worked on Libra for like briefly.
Wow.
That's another like project, the blockchain project Facebook had.
Yep.
So another fun story to talk about if interested. But yeah, and I joined Reddit in 2020. I got an awesome opportunity at the time to build an entire A/B test platform on Reddit. I myself is always a big fan of data-driven decisions. And I believe that's the best way to make decisions, and even in marketing as well. Data-driven intelligence is the way. So I got the opportunity to build this whole platform for Reddit, which in my opinion, that's like the best opportunity for me. Reddit is able to benefit from this by a lot. So like from 2020 to 2020, like I left in 2023 last year. So Reddit has been able to grow like multiply multiple times in the past 3 years, like massive growth. And then they just IPO'd, which is a really massive success as well. The little bit background on me, I have always been in this data infra type of world for a long time as engineer, and as an engineer manager, I'm also pretty hands-on. So I'm a big fan for data-driven decisions and marketing as well.
And look, it must be difficult. I have a few friends, actually, a few pretty close friends that either have worked at some of the big players like Meta, Google, etc., and either they've gone on to do startups or other things, or they've stayed in that ecosystem. And almost without exception, one of the hardest things for them when they strike out on their own is the thought that, hey, am I doing the right thing? Am I giving up this, in many cases, very lucrative career, very safe career, especially family members who think, okay, you've arrived, you've made it, you've made it to one of the top tech companies in the entire world, huge safety net. Why would you ever leave the cocoon of Meta or somebody like a Reddit? Did that play into your decision making at all? Thinking, geez, there's this tension between I have this great job. I'm probably making great money. I'm doing something I love. Why would I want to put myself under the microscope and the challenge of striking out on my own and becoming an entrepreneur, starting a startup, wearing the pain, having maybe a less certain future? And when that decision making process happened, was your thinking, hey, even if this startup fails, which hopefully it doesn't, Meta's not going anywhere, Google's not going anywhere, Reddit's not going anywhere, I can always go back and be an engineer at a big tech company if this whole startup gig doesn't work out?
You're not wrong. I am losing a lot of money leaving the companies like that. It's a lot of sunken costs. You're not around on that front. It's funny that when I left Facebook for Reddit, or even though Reddit has amazing perks and everything, Facebook is like probably top in the world. My mom was like, if you leave Facebook, who's gonna cook for you? I'm like, Mom, I'm like a 26, almost 30-year-old adult. And then the question you ask is, who's gonna cook for you?
Yes.
So
I
that's how
understand this. I
spoiled
understand this
I
question
was.
because I have an Asian wife. So I understand that Asian families, their love language is food. Like they might never tell you they love you, but their love language is food. They will never let you go home
I know.
hungry. They will put food in boxes for you to take away when you go home. It's crazy, but definitely that Asian love language being food. So I totally understand where your mother is coming from here.
I know that's my mom was confused, but but ultimately she understands, right? Like I feel like my entrepreneurship, like that spirit in me, definitely comes from like runs in the family as well. Both my parents are doing e-commerce businesses. I have grown up in the environment where we never had like a stable job. My parents never had the most stable job ever. Like they have been running a business since when I can remember. They have their own silk business. They both studied silk and textile in college and then decided to do their own thing. That was really tough because they had no connection, they had no money. I can imagine the pain there. I've seen and witnessed firsthand the struggle they had running a business, from manufacturing, from sourcing, from sales and the marketing, and then eventually establish a company and hiring as well. So I can talk about that a little bit more, known that like the struggle like of entrepreneurship, but I also know the fulfillment. I understand that part. Like you're really truly building a business here. You are serving a lot of people that they may just like not like a lot of people that benefit like tiny little bit from you. That's the fulfillment for me. That's a fulfillment for my parents as well. So I have always wanted to do something like that, even though I know like I potentially is losing all the money, or hopefully it won't make it back in the future. But like a lot of sunken costs right now. But I think it's like a journey I wanted to go on for sure in my life. Yeah.
And look, it's not like you're an old woman. You've got lots and lots of time ahead of you. You're still very
Yeah.
young. You've got lots of opportunity ahead of you. This whole tech industry is not going anywhere anytime soon. So I don't think you have opportunity to worry about. I think you'll always have opportunities. And I think that's probably one of the most exciting things. But it's interesting that you say that your upbringing potentially quite heavily influenced you. My parents, my father in particular, he owned his own business all while I was growing up, and so I grew up in the family business and helping out my dad as I was growing up. He owned a computer store latterly once computers started to make it big and become a big thing. My wife's parents all also owned their own business all while she was growing up. They had takeaway food stores, and so I think that whole the environment that you're raised in, I guess there's this argument about nature versus nurture and how much is contributes to who you become as an adult. But I definitely think
Mhm.
that sense of desire to take at least some element of risk in your life, like I think if that's not modeled for you
Yeah.
by your parents, it is really, really hard to become an adult that wants to take calculated risks. Do you agree?
I definitely agree. I have always joked about like how like a big companies or the vesting schedules is like a golden handcuff. Is you're always thinking about maybe I'll quit next vesting day, but you never did because the next vesting day will be another 3 months away. So it's like golden handcuff on you like all the time. At some point, you will have to be brave enough, be like, oh, today is the day. I know a lot of people talking about it, but yeah, not a lot of people executing on it.
Yep, I'm with you there. And where did the idea of Aimerce even come from? How did you think, okay, the
Mhm,
world is moving
mhm,
towards closed ecosystems, right? You saw it firsthand
mhm,
inside
mhm,
these large tech
yeah,
companies. They're increasingly
mhm,
building walled gardens. They've got access to basically digital oil, which is first party, zero and first party data up the wazoo. They can charge increasingly
mhm,
higher prices for
mhm,
access to that data. They're building out ad platforms and
mhm,
technology
mhm,
that has targeting that is beyond anything we could have ever imagined before. And so the smaller players out there,
mhm,
particularly e-commerce brands, they are having an increasingly hard time having access to the breadth of data they need to not have to pay for every single piece of traffic that comes their way. And then also remonetizing that traffic again and
mhm,
again because they got to pay for acquisition every single time. It's a burden that a lot of modern e-commerce businesses are really struggling with. And it feels like maybe some of those challenges that your parents faced running e-commerce businesses, maybe that helped to inform a little bit of your direction. But what drew you specifically into e-com, and then specifically what you're trying to solve over at Aimerce? Because just in full transparency, I've never worked with Aimerce before, so I've kind of just going by what's on the tin. But it
mhm,
feels you
mhm,
are giving brands the ability to collect data in a privacy compliant way that effectively doesn't require a cookie, and it allows them to start building up usable data on their customers in ways that they can leverage to personalize the experience and the journey for their customers in a privacy compliant way. But what was the motivation
mhm,
specifically
mhm.
to do this when you probably had a million opportunities open to you at the time?
We didn't like. I'll be very transparent with you. We did not start with this idea when Amos was started. Amos was working on something else, and along the way, we talked to a lot of brands and customers. While we're working on something else, I can tell you a little bit more about what we were working on before. We were helping Amazon sellers establish their own brands on D2C. And we get to talk to a lot of brands at the time. And during the course of helping out those brands, we realized there's a massive gap about how they utilize data and how they like leverage, maximize the power of data to do marketing. And marketing is can be translated to money, right? Revenue. So we saw a huge gap there. And it was like, okay, this is a very interesting thing we're seeing because majority of the brands we're seeing, I'm talking strictly talking about small medium business here. Obviously, bigger guys, the Fortune 500 companies, they have teams working on that. Those for those smaller brands and businesses, the most thing I'm seeing they're doing is having Google Analytics, and for Google Analytics, the most thing they're looking at is just conversion data, and that's like a very basic level of analyzing data, right? And I was like, okay, this is a huge mess because data is money here. Data is revenue. Data is the most efficient way to drive revenue, and period. And then for e-commerce especially because you can gather a lot of information that you cannot gather offline, and cookies are going away, so people are struggling because they don't know if there's a alternative or if there's any other way to get around it. So we were like, okay, let's do a bit of research on this to see if we can help them out. And what we did was pretty interesting. We read the entire Safari intelligent tracking protocol, the ITP, and that was a long, boring pages, like a lot of like protocol like definitions there. We're trying to see, hey, like how do they actually work, right? How does this tracking actually work on the browser? And is there anything that is within compliance, like can help them solve this problem? And we do find something very interesting here. There's one kind of workaround within Safari protocol, which is the first party data and the first party pixel. What does it mean is it's created and owned by the domain owned directly and only tracking on the domain alone. That is allowed by Safari for longer period of time. We're like, that's the way. And that actually matches what I believe for the future as well, because this is first party data. This is the data that belong to you. This compliant data. This is the data that can be leveraged without being exploited by third party, the big guys out there. We were thinking at that time, this is definitely an interesting direction. And this is something that those small medium business are missing out. So we tested out a bunch of experiments on this, and then we realized there is like at least 20 to 40% like data they're missing here. And that translates to 10 to 45% revenue, which is like massive for a lot of businesses. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And for the less technical parts of our audience, can you help us understand and distinguish the difference between a cookie and a pixel? Because to the uninitiated, they seem like they do a lot of the same things, or at least they have a lot of the same capabilities, but they are very distinct technologies. So help us understand the difference between the two, because you live this every day.
A pixel, you can think about pixel as the tracking code. It's usually a JavaScript snippet living on your website, right? That's all the data collection for you. And a cookie is something that is placed on your browser, Chrome or Safari or any other browser that you use. And in the past world, when third-party cookies still alive, a lot of people put cookies on your browser. So that cookie follows you around on the internet. And you probably have been like wondering why you keep seeing the same ad on this random blog that you visited 2 days ago. That is why. Because when you visit that brand or that like on Facebook ad, you click on Facebook ad, they place a cookie on your browser. So when you visit another blog, they know your browser has this cookie live there. So they displayed ad that catering to you. That's how it worked before, with cookie living on a browser, follow you around. And this is no longer the case anymore.
And we think of a pixel as just a piece of JavaScript that's activated when someone hits your website. The additional limitation that is inherent in that approach, whether it's fingerprint JS or whether it's your piece of technology or any other piece of JavaScript technology, it can't follow you around because it doesn't load anything in your browser. But what it does give you is it gives you a deep clickstream analytics across what someone is doing, well beyond what anything Google provides can do. But it still is only going to be able to track the behavior on your own website, right? So if we think about your technology as distinct from something like Triple Whale or Northbeam or any one of the other major players in the attribution world, how do you think your technology brings additional benefits to brands that kind of helps them deal with the loss of cookie power?
So the trick here is if you are a cookie that is created by the domain on the server side, that cookie can live for a year by the browser. And that cookie is only recognized, used by that domain only. So if you go on any other websites other than the domain, it will not be recognized, will be not used. It's just garbage. You can think about us as like a ID system where each of the visitor that comes to the domain, we will assign them as a unique ID if they are visiting as the same person from the same browser. We do not track IP. We do not do fingerprinting. We do not do any of those things. All we do is we assign each person a unique ID. And if they comes back within the same browser, and we will know that there's a cookie that living on the browser is the same person that they were there before if they did not clean up the cookie. Obviously, they have the choice to. And then we know they're the person from before. So we can do a profile resolution. Like we can merge the profile into one profile so we can really understand the customer journey here. We know they visited 2 days ago. We know they come back, but we do not collect any information without consent. Everything is within consent. Only if they allow the analytic tracking, then we are able to collect those data.
And that's effectively with a cookie permission that you would have to give all websites today. You have the opportunity to decline that, and then they opt out effectively. How do you think, because I have my own take on this, but I'd love yours, I think the cookie warnings are ridiculous. I think they're an absolute joke.
Yeah.
I think the data out there shows so disruptive to the user experience. It's complete horseshit. We're holding a tracking device in that's always a meter from our body or on our body physically 24/7, 365. If people actually
Sure.
gave a shit about privacy, they wouldn't use a phone. They would try to go off grid. They would,
Mhm.
to my way of thinking, at least what I see, people might say they give a shit about privacy, but what they do tells me they actually don't give a shit about privacy. What they give a shit about is convenience. And anything that gives their life convenience, they're willing to give up almost any amount of privacy required to have high levels of convenience in their life. And I have always felt that Google going after cookies is a total red herring. And they don't give a shit about privacy. I don't think Meta gives a shit about privacy. Frankly, I don't think any of big tech companies actually give a shit about privacy. I think they want to increase the power of their walled gardens and the value of their data that they're collecting at scale. Even something as simple as the single sign-on technology that they put out there into the world to make our lives easier, that allows them to gather more data legally, right? And so I actually think this whole privacy discussion in big tech is one giant red herring. But even if it wasn't a giant red herring, the reality is I don't think people actually, even themselves, give a shit about privacy. But even if they did give a shit about privacy, I don't think cookie warnings are the right way to go about it. So, what is your overarching opinion
Mhm.
on the world of privacy and this concept of cookie warnings? Because at the end of the day, you work hand in hand with first party cookie technology, which is not going away. Many people don't understand that. They don't understand that it's third party cookies that are going away, not
Mhm.
first party cookies. First party cookies are probably never going to go away, at least for the foreseeable future. So you work hand in hand with existing cookie
Right.
technology to do
Mhm.
identity resolution. But in general
Mhm.
terms, what is your opinion on
Mhm.
privacy and where this whole industry? Because I think of it as the privacy industrial complex. That's what I think of it as, because it seems like it has just been built up to be this giant thing that most consumers don't give a rat's ass about, but big tech does because they like to own everybody's data.
Correct. So you're right. I think tracking is not gonna go away, right? Because like tracking brought convenience. The convenience comes to personalization on the website, recommendations, and better serving of advertisement. That's like a whole $1 billion industry. That's never gonna go away. And but what's interesting about data collection is what I truly believe is like in the past 10 years, Facebook, Google has grown like really fast because of the data they're able to collect, the data they are able to own. It's purely a centralized way of collecting data. Pretty much every single e-commerce website I work with have a Facebook pixel living on the website. That pixel is collecting data on their behalf. So same as Google, that power is huge. Like Facebook literally knows pretty much most of the internet's data, which is fascinating if you think about it. So I do believe tracking is not gonna go away. But instead, what I think is the big guy's power is gonna be diminished over the course of time because like Safari is, strictly talking about Safari because Chrome is Google hands is tied with Chrome. So the Chrome is gonna be very interesting how they turn out. Google's revenue depends on Chrome by a lot, their ads revenues. But Apple doesn't. Apple actually cares. Apple cares. If you read about the Safari's tracking protocol, Apple does give a shit. And it's like very weird. It's to the point that I don't think a lot of this the privacy they do is so strict. That's not the standard. Like that I that's what I think. I was like a little bit too strict here. But hey, Safari actually is really private. I'm not advertising for Apple at all, but I read the protocol. We know this is actually pretty interesting here. And we'll see how Chrome turned out. I'm very curious. Because Google has been talking about this for like years, and they haven't done any action yet until they mentioned things are going to change by end of this year. So we will stay tuned and see how the policy turned out, like how they actually make changes. I'm very curious on that. But Apple has done thing like the privacy thing on Safari and on Mac as well, on iPhone as well. I actually think Apple is doing the right thing here. And because of Apple is doing the right thing, the whole world is forced to change to that direction where data collection is distributed. So everybody should be collecting data on their own instead of letting the big guys collecting data on their behalf. That's going to be the change. Not the tracking is not going to go away. It's going to be distributed.
Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you. And now back to your listening. And how do you think blockchain-based identity management plays into the privacy future? Because it feels like Web3 was dealt, if not a death blow, then a death setback with the implosion of FTX, with the implosion of crypto. The reality is Web3 felt like we were right on the precipice of Web3 taking over the internet. Our VR was going to be everywhere. We were all going to be living in a digital world and living in a holodeck. And it felt like we were all moving in that direction. Meta was spending billions and billions of dollars a year to make that happen, even changed their name to Meta. And then the brakes got slammed on as soon as crypto blew up in everyone's face and everybody walked away with billions of dollars and living in some Caribbean island somewhere. And some of them ended up in jail. And it felt like big tech was looking for the next big thing to replace Web3 with, as the next big technology wave that everybody was going to have to adopt and pay for. And it feels like they've pointed all of their technical guns now at AI instead and made this giant pivot. I don't know. Maybe Meta will change their name again. Maybe they'll become, I don't know, maybe they'll become something with AI in their name instead. But it's interesting how much of a beast Zuck is, because I tell you, that man has some gigantic cojones to pivot a multi-billion-dollar company, lay off thousands of people on pet projects that they were working on at his behest for years, and then almost overnight turn on a dime to keep investors happy and keep people enamored with the Meta machine. So this was such a hard pivot for them. And I think every tech company, basically, if you're a startup and you don't have AI somewhere in your name, you're probably not going to get funded these days. So it's really interesting to see how quickly the tech industry pivoted, and the VC industry followed like lapdogs right behind that pivot to make sure they didn't miss the next big wave. So AI seems to, and I'm getting quite heavily involved in the AI space now. We're looking at starting a new AI startup ourselves and doing some pretty cool stuff in the space. But how do you think AI and privacy are going to evolve in parallel together? And with your identity resolution capabilities, you are tracking people's behavior, whether or not they are yet authenticated on a given website. But once they authenticate, and if you've been tracking them all along, then you can merge those identities with their authenticated identity. Then you can grab even more data on that individual, and you can start to then personalize at a level of scale that was not possible before. Is any of the, in your technology, what is the AI bit? How does that help? And how do you see this evolving in parallel with privacy?
I have experimented a lot of things because I'm a quite optimist in technology. So when the things came out, I'm always like the first person like jump on this and learn more things about it. I'm also like a huge nerd. And you bet I wouldn't miss out on this. When I first started exploring things, it was so and I quickly realized AI is not mature enough to do a lot of things yet. Like it doesn't mean it will not happen in the future, right? It just means this is not mature enough. I'll give you an example. Well, we have explored a path where we will try to use AI to help e-commerce brands develop creatives. And the project quickly failed. The failure comes to not because the AI is not able to generate things according to your will. It's just mostly this is not authentic enough of content. It doesn't look good. Some of the stuff is interesting, is very imaginative, but it's just not authentic enough to attract people. Like in this world, I think more and more in the future, people crave authenticity. Like anything that, like, funny enough, I was doing this one experiment with one of the watch brand, and they sell very expensive watches. And I generated a bunch of like pretty interesting creative for this guy. Turned out his reply to me was, "Hey, actually, if I just take a video with my watch on my wrist randomly right now, it will perform better than your creative, than your AI generated creative."
I
And I was
love
like,
that.
that blew my mind. That blew my mind. Like, that I was like, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. The stuff the AI generated is pretty, it's interesting, but yes, he's not wrong. His ad will perform better than those. So that's the moment I realized, hey, actually, this is not mature enough for a lot of productionized enterprise usage yet. Like a pure generative content still need a lot of human touch on it. Still need designer fix on it, or like some content copywriter to work on it. Like you can use that as inspiration, but not just like a pure automated like way. So my mind was shifting away from that direction a little bit after this conversation. I was like, actually, what I believe the most interesting way for now to use AI on is have AI interpret on and work on top of huge amount of data. For example, if you have known all your website behavior, like AI is the best technology to interpret, extract insights out of the data to give you, first of all, understanding of the data, like easier way to query the data. Third, maybe generating some of the recommendations for you to consider. I doubt they're able to do very agentic automatic things based on data yet. This can happen in the future, but for now, like a recommendation for you to consider is pretty powerful already. It's like human computer like collaboration. It's a co-pilot type of thing. That thing works. That's why I feel like, hey, actually, if I'm able to understand the behaviors on my website, then I'm able to help e-commerce brands to take their brand to the next level without having a data analytic person on team at all. This is powerful. This is powerful. You're able to understand your customer way better. You're able to understand your website behavior conversion rate way better. You're able to come up with creative suggestions, recommendations way better than before. So that's how we use the data right now for our brands. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And how do you think of yourselves as different? Because no startup operates in an industry of one, and very rarely are they creating a brand new category of software. They're usually going into an existing category of software. And
Mhm.
so, first of all, I'm assuming you've got competitors in the space, and I can think of a few off the top of my head. But what do you think you bring to the table that makes you uniquely distinct versus some of your major competitors? And then what do you bring that sits on top of? So you're really good at collecting data, you're really good at deciphering data and interpreting data. But
Mhm.
then how do we take all this wonderful raw material
Mhm.
and how do we turn that to insightful insights that then brands can actually take action on? And what does that pathway look like for you guys in relation to
Mhm.
your customers?
So the major difference right now is we're taking this product to a whole different direction. Instead of just passively collecting data and pipe it over to marketing channels, which majority of the competitors are working on this moment, I think this is a right direction as well, because this actually translates to revenue increase. And then this has been proven. A lot of revenue increase, like a lot more than you think. And but we're taking this whole thing to the next level where I believe the most powerful like thing data can do is more than just data to the marketing channels. It's more like based on the data, how you understand the customers. And on top of understanding customers, then you can be more intelligently do marketing. Like marketing has always should be based on who your customers are, what they need, speaking their language. You wouldn't know those things. Like you mentioned, like podcasts is you don't even know a lot of who your audience are. Like you don't know their like information profiles because you don't have enough data. Imagine you have those data, then you are able to take your marketing to the next level because then you can speak their language, exactly what they wanted, what things will be interesting to them, right? You can provide more value to them. That's the most important thing. Marketing is always about like providing value to people so they can like not only buy your software but also learn something from you as well. That's what I'm looking for here. Like I want to help those brands to be able to do that. And that's interesting to me. Not just passively passing the data through, but also like understanding the things and how you can leverage those current marketing channels, take that to the next level.
Yeah, you're exactly right. If I knew exactly which segments of a podcast, so instead of just saying, okay, I got to listen because somebody listened to at
Yeah.
least 3 seconds of an episode and that counts as a listen, if I could know exactly which sections got the highest listenership, if I knew which, what was their
Yeah.
gender, what was their interest, where did they come from, down to, instead of just United States, like what part of the US did they come from, what industry do they work in, what were their job roles. I don't need PII, meaning I don't need to be able to associate this with an individual human being, but just even in aggregate, if I could know, okay, cool, 25% of the people listening to my podcast, more than 5 minutes an episode, are CEOs of tech companies from Miami. If I knew that, for example, then geez, wow, how much better could I target my content and make it more relevant for that exact audience? But I have almost zero data from, and this is a problem not just for me, even the biggest podcasters in the world, unless they are regularly directly canvassing their listenership and saying, hey, could you tell us where you're from? And then they analyze the comments and they do some other way of trying to get higher levels of engagement from their audience so that they can extract data from them. We're all firing in the dark to a degree, but it feels once you've got a website, especially an e-commerce website that people are frequenting on a regular basis, this starts to become a true gold mine. And especially once they authenticate, and now we know their address, right? We know where they're located. And now we can merge this data that we've collected over maybe many visits. We're now able to bring this together into a holistic view of who that human being is. And this feels like a really powerful tool.
Exactly. Like just one example on top of your example is if they are from Miami, you could have joined a Miami club or a Miami community or like a Slack channel, Discord, Facebook groups, and then your growth strategy will be like amazing here. Same thing applied to brands, right? So there's a lot of interesting ideas you can generate from those data. That's like very different from just, oh, I run Facebook ads, I run Google ads, etc. Like you can get a lot of creative marketing strategies from it.
And I also think it starts to remove the simple trust me factor that Google and Meta and Google say, look, just send us all your data and trust us. Sorry, I don't actually trust you. And obviously, you're going to try to be doing things that lead to more clicks and more revenue for you, not necessarily more clicks and revenue for me as a brand. Obviously, they're going to look after their best interest first and my best interest second. And they're trying to maximize revenue for themselves, and they're trying to maximize bids, and they're trying to maximize per click revenue as best as they can. And so to my way of thinking, I would rather have data from platform like yours also plumbed into a CDP platform, which is designed specifically to be able to do that segmentation. So I would rather do all the segmentation myself based on rules that are important to me and based on aspects of customer behavior that are important to me as a brand, and where I can actually make a difference and move the needle. Then I would rather create those segments myself and then ship those segments off to somebody like a Google or a Meta and say, you don't need to know anything about this segment. Just create lookalike audience based on this. I will determine the segments that matter to me. Now you go and look for more people like that. And it feels like this starts to bring an element of control back to the brand that they haven't had for a long time.
Exactly. That's exactly the same conversation I had with one of my clients. They are a really big brand in LA, and they were actually exploring the things like exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's the right mindset that exploring, because instead of doing, oh, I want to optimize the CBO campaign, I want to optimize these parameters. Actually, what I think you should do is really understand your customers before you optimize on those little parameters on this Facebook campaign, because that's like a tiny that can be improvements, but that's not long lasting. They were talking about how to understand the customer's age because they are a skincare product. Age is really important. Age is a very difficult thing to predict, but there are different ways to try to predict and understand the group of age, the age of the people. There are definitely ways to do that. It's a predictive thing. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but this is going to be way better experiment than anything else.
And especially if they buy an age specific product. If you're buying something that's for aged
Exactly.
skin, for example,
Yes.
and okay, this is for seniors, then you've got a pretty good idea they're probably over 65 kind of thing, right?
Exactly. There are definitely ways to predict that. We can do a lot of calculation associations, those things. This is pure math. There's no PII collected. It's just a pure math of predictive technology, and that's how you win, in my opinion.
And how do you start thinking about integrations here? Because integrations drive the e-commerce world, and we see platforms like Klaviyo, for example, and one of the reasons they've been so successful is because they're integrated with everybody and their dog, and you're not tapping into a
Right.
single platform or technology. You're tapping into an entire ecosystem. It's the same reason why people go with
Right.
Shopify many times, not necessarily because Shopify is the best tool for the job of e-commerce, but because it's the biggest e-commerce or one of the biggest e-commerce ecosystems out there with over 12,000 apps now in the App Store. And many of those apps are integrated together into a cohesive stack that make implementation of e-commerce a lot easier for brands and makes the selection process of technology a lot easier for them if it automatically works with their core stack. It's a no-brainer. So I can think automatically off the top of my head, I don't think you have the ambition, and tell me if I'm wrong here, I don't think you have the ambition to become a full end-to-end personalization platform like a Nosto or an end-to-end CDP platform like a Segment or Alexa. You probably don't have ambitions to become all things to all brands, but you can become the hub and they can almost become spokes in a way where you become a central data collection resource that almost any of these other platforms can tap into to make their technology and therefore the customer experience they drive better. And even down to platforms like there are quiz commerce platforms, right, that collect data specifically and put people through a questionnaire process of their requirements, their needs, their desires, their interests. And so it feels like if we were to take something like a Jebbit and their quiz commerce experience, merge that together with the kind of data you're collecting, then merge that together with data that CDPs naturally collect anyway, now we're starting to create a ecosystem of very actionable technology that either happens automatically, like for example, in a personalization platform, and it just personalizes their experience on the front end, or as you say, can help inform overall marketing strategy very holistically. So I think like you guys on your own are probably amazing, but you can't do everything. And so it feels like integrations are going to become super important to your success and the success of your merchants.
You are speaking my mind. It's walking to a restaurant. If you see they have every single cuisine on the menu, you'll be like, are they actually legit? If they see they specialize in this one type of ramen, they'd be like, okay, they probably know what they're doing, right? So
Yeah.
same idea here. I don't think I'm able to do everything well, but if I specialize in this one thing and then integrate with every other platforms, I currently integrate with Klaviyo, integrate with Meta, integrate with Google, integrate with Shopify as well. So like I can leverage other people's specialty and then make their job do better. I be part of their ecosystem. They can be part of my ecosystem as well. So we can leverage each other. So that's what I believe I would go with that direction. And that make my merchants, my clients' life easier as well. They don't have to learn another software to do the things they want to do.
Makes complete sense. It's a pretty solid strategy that we've seen many other companies leverage to great success. And how do you guys make your money? You're a pixel and tracking platform. You're effectively a lightweight analytics, a data gathering platform that then can be put through many analytical tools. So how do you guys make your money? Because you're a SaaS platform, effectively. It's hosted, the pixel's hosted by you guys on their domain. But how do you guys make your money and how do you plan to monetize all this capability that you're giving merchants?
Right. So the business model is quite simple. We charge a monthly subscription fee based on the traffic The reason why it has to be based on traffic is because the cost increase the more traffic the merchants is onboarded with us. So they're gonna see results directly from their current marketing channel. They're gonna see results directly from Klaviyo, from Meta, from Google. Like they're gonna see that the revenue increase. On Klaviyo, it's super easy. You're just gonna see the incremental revenue within 2 weeks of time. And like my clients are generally seeing 20 to 40% increase within 2 weeks to a month of time. That's just amazing. So the return on investment is like a no-brainer to a lot of people. A lot of them were like, when I first onboarded, they would be like, "Oh, is this actually gonna work?" After a month, they'd be like, "Okay, we know this is gonna work."
Now we can't live without
So
you.
I know, I know. So I'm pretty happy to help my clients succeed. Like I'm excited for that. So like they pay me like a few $100 a month. It's like for people who are able to increase 10 to 40% revenue, it's like nothing to them. And I'm a big fan of being friends with my clients. So I personally talk to my clients all the time, not just selling the product or whatever. I just check out their account and see is there anything I can help them improve, any other strategies I can think of on top of my head to help them like brainstorm something together. So they like that. So this is not just a software I sell to you and I never talk to you again. I become your long-term like technology partner, which a lot of like small brands don't have that resource. And I'm happy to do. Yeah.
And when you look out across the next 12 to 18 months, is there anything today that you don't do that your customers are saying, "Hey, I wish you did this"? Or is there anything on your immediate radar that you go, "Hey, we don't do this today, but I can see this being really important for brands. We definitely need to enhance and extend our product to do these three things within the next 18 months that we think is going to bring crazy value to our merchants"?
Yeah, yeah, that's one thing I mentioned actually just now. This very simple thing, which is now we just pipe all the data directly to those channels, right? With no extra processing. Like we do have the ID system, which is like robust, and then we do the resolution and we send over the data to marketing channels. But there's one thing like a lot of my customers are very interested in is instead of sending this one data in one chunk, can we segment it in a way that they feel is reasonable, and can we come up with creative way to segment it, catering to the business needs. A lot of my customers are in conversation with me. This is not a very simple thing, which is like, oh, segmented today, because this has to be related to their business needs. It's not going to be one solution solve for all problem type of thing, but there are going to be a lot of interesting ways to do that. Like segmentation is the one step towards personalization. And segmentation is one step towards like understanding who your customers are. And then there are a lot of experiment. Obviously, not every single segmentation is going to work. We have to do a lot of experimentation to see what works and what does not. So that's something like a lot of my customers has talked to me about it. And I think that's a quite interesting thing to do, especially for Meta. For Klaviyo, they have a segmentation there, but we can also do some intelligent for creative Klaviyo segmentation, so they can design their email creative differently, catering to those segments as well.
And how do you work with CDPs, for example, Klaviyo, for example? Because most of these platforms, they have their own user IDs, they do their own user tracking, they have to do an element of tracking to be able to do their own segmentation within their own platforms, provide user analytics in their own
Right.
platforms. So does this, if someone implements Aimerce, does it effectively almost hot swap out their tracking for your tracking, but then you're creating the segments directly within their platform using how do you harmonize user IDs basically between your platform and their platform, because they may have a different user ID for the same user that they use internally?
I usually recommend to my clients that we're not a substitute for their system. We are complementary to what Klaviyo currently have. We're complementary to what Meta currently have. I don't think we'll ever replace their tracking at all. There are certain things that we cannot do. For example, like FBP, FBC, these kind of cookies is only able to be recognizable by Facebook. No one knows what they actually mean. We don't know how to locate that to a Facebook user. So the only thing we can do is collect more those type of identity and then send over to Facebook. So I do not think we're able to replace them. We are going to be like complementary to those platforms. They're going to have more data, more complete, accurate data with a central resolution, data resolution, not just a Klaviyo resolution, not Facebook resolution, but a central way. We combine all the Klaviyo ID, Facebook ID, Google ID into one central data resolution. That's the most accurate way of doing things.
Very interesting. Very interesting. This is a super exciting space. And YIQI, it's been a great conversation. It's been enlightening. You're an expert, you're a technical genius, and we need more people like you in the world helping to helping brands to do a better job at treating their customers like individuals and treating them like human beings as opposed to treating them just like numbers on a spreadsheet. So I applaud your work and I wish you every success. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, and I do appreciate the time you spent with me, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to turn the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. So, Yiqi Wu from Aimerce, what is your question for me today?
Jason, so far in 2020, from January 2024 till now, what is the most exciting technology you have seen so far?
That's such a great question. I haven't been, to be perfectly honest with you, I haven't been that excited about anything so far this year. I think what just got presented at WWDC by Apple
Mm-hmm.
and their evolution of Siri and the way that they're going to be pulling in, they're going to be integrating, at least initially, with OpenAI. Some of that stuff was, a few years ago, I switched from Apple to Android, but definitely some of the things and the approaches, the on-device stuff that they're bringing to the table from an AI perspective looks really super interesting and super relevant and immediately usable in ways that only Apple creates usability. They are pretty unique in the world in the way that they fuse art and technology together. It's pretty insane. And some of the stuff that I saw, some of the announcements that they made, and some of the demos that they did were pretty incredible, especially with a pure on-device technology and your data, your personal data being on device and encrypted. It's pretty incredible. And the other thing, oddly, that I've been
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
impressed with that I did not expect to be impressed with is the native because I use Windows, the Windows native Copilot, which is still in preview mode, its ability to create AI generated images.
Yeah.
I use it almost every day, because I use it to
Right.
help me create images. I just describe what I want and I describe the style that I want. And it'll generate 4 images for me. Every time I request an image, it generates 4 examples. And I use this to create some cover art for my podcast episodes. And then I import some of those images into Canva and create thumbnails, etc. And wow, even in just a year of using it, it has gotten substantially better, like substantially better. And I know it's really just a skin for Dolly, etc. But the way that they've integrated into the OS and some of the ways I'm seeing it be integrated into the OS and seamlessly available, almost like a tooltip when you need it, that stuff excites me. It seems simple, but actually actionable AI in the moment for me is actually more impressive than some of the big ideas that seem to be coming out of Silicon Valley. And I just love that super actionable in the moment stuff. Like that to me has probably been the most impressive stuff this year.
I agree with you. I'm pretty impressed with Apple, what has Apple announced, and I also agree with the Copilot approach. I feel like human and the computer working together is gonna be the future, and then like how AI can help people do less repetitive and manual work and do less brain power to focus on creative things is probably gonna be a very exciting future for all of us. And also, I feel like you're right. Integration into those like current existing systems is, in my opinion, it's pretty smart. Instead of creating a whole new different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm loving it, especially considering the fact that I'm not a creative. Like my wife's the creative in our family and she's the artist, she's the designer, she knows pretty color, she's a qualified interior designer, so she knows what something beautiful should look like and she recognizes beauty in the world in ways that I don't. Like I'll just overlook something and she'll stop me and say, "Look at that, isn't that beautiful?" and be like, "Actually, yeah, that is really beautiful." And so I don't necessarily recognize beauty in the world in the same way that she does through her creative lens. And so I think she's gifted in that way. I'm not gifted in that same way. My art is like talking like this and speaking on stage and writing. That's my art. And for someone as dumb creatively as me to be able to just describe in a few sentences something creative that I want to exist in the world and describe it using really super basic language, and then be able to, because I wouldn't be able to draw those images myself. I would need to describe a brief to a designer and then get them to design it, maybe design 2 or 3 iterations, and then I'd be like, yes, you captured exactly what I had in my mind's eye. I need to be doing this like multiple times a week. I don't have, first of all, I don't have the money to pay a professional designer to work on my stuff full time. Second of all, I can't wait for the turnaround time of a designer to actually do the work, get it back to me, do refinements, etc. So I think that this making creativity more accessible to non-creatives, that feels like a huge win to me, for sure.
I love that. I love that a lot. Yeah. I love that line as well. Making
It's
creative more accessible to non-creative people. Yeah.
love
Or
it, love
less
it.
creative people.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
think
exactly.
everybody is creative.
Yiqi, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. I'll also put a link to the Aimerce website. But other than those two things, how do you like people to get a hold of you if they want to have a chat about all things data, privacy, first party, zero party, data collection, analytics? If they want to talk to you about that in e-commerce, how do they get a hold of you?
I think they can I'll send you my personal Calendly. I'm welcome everybody if they want to chat with me, book 30 minutes with me, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested in technology or interested in talking about things in general. I'll be very happy to help. Just if you can help out a little bit, I'm happy to do so.
Love it. I'll be happy to put that link in the show notes as well when we publish this episode. Thank you very much for your time. I've thoroughly enjoyed this chat. It's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.